Asylum Letter Number 2. And when I looked out, I saw that we were heading fast upon a series of iron gates set in stone, wickedly arched and crowned with tall spikes of erratically varying height. But what unnerved me completely lay beyond the gates. A pair of wooden doors, massive, pointed peak towering over us even from afar. Bar-crossed and studded with heavy bolts, the doors were set in a great stone wall that appeared to be protecting whatever waited inside. So paralyzed was I by the sight before me that I did not notice we had already driven past the first of the 3 spiked gates guarding access to the door beyond until I heard it crashing to a close behind us. A short drive onward and we were at the second gate. I turned to look behind me and saw the barricades we had passed clanging shut behind us, one after the other, by power of unseen hands, or simply through years of habit, more accustomed were they to being closed than open. A quiver began in my toes and ascended through my frame, vibrating the marrow in every bone until it reached the back of my neck and froze there. Were these gates erected for the protection of this great establishment, for the security of these admirable administrators of magical medicine? Were they meant to keep intruders out, or to keep the inhabitants in? With each turn of the wheels that brought me closer to the final gate, I tried hard to drown out the answer to my question with whatever music I could conjure into my head. A sharp tug on the other end of the leather strap attached to my choking collar pulled me back into the world that existed outside of my head.
Can you imagine having to go through life looking through a different lens than everybody else? For some, with both minor and severe mental illness, this is a daily struggle. In addition to this, what if you aren't being provided the help and care you both need and deserve? Many are also forced to deal with this reality. One of these people is Emily Autumn, the author of the book, The Asylum for Wayward Victorian Girls. This book, being part autobiographical and part a work of fiction, reveals what the mental health care system is truly like in the eyes of the author. The basis of The Asylum for Wayward Victorian Girls is that of Emily Autumn's own personal experiences in a 21st century mental institution, and the fictional story of a character, also named Emily, in a Victorian asylum. Throughout the book, the 2 stories alternate until the reader cannot differentiate whose story it is. What you just heard was an excerpt from this book. Throughout this short film, you will come to realize that the mental institutions and psychiatric hospitals have come a long way from the early horrific conditions and mind-numbing treatments. Furthermore, these facilities still have a long way to go. And now, an interview with Ruth Ann Blank. I'm here today with my grandmother to talk to her about mental illness through the ages. During this research project, I found out that my great-great-grandmother was mentally ill, so that would be her grandmother. So nice to have you. Thank you for being here.
I'm happy to help you, Abby.
I just want to start off by asking you to tell us the story of your grandmother.
My grandmother died long before I was born, when my mother was about 14. I never heard much about her, except my aunts used to say she was too good for this world. I found out many years later that she had a mental illness, and after hearing the time she was put in mental institutions, it was usually after she gave birth. Therefore, I am just jumping to the conclusion that it was probably from postpartum. That doesn't mean that she didn't have some mental illness before that, but they didn't keep records, and people didn't talk about it at all. I found out from my mother many, many years later, when she was 70s, I think, that her mother was a wonderful mother when she was feeling well, but when she was feeling bad, she just did crazy things. She remembers that her father had to take her mother away to get help, and that she and her sister were left alone with their little baby brother. And she came back for a time after that. And I found out from another relative that she had stabbed herself with a knife, and from the resulting blood loss, she died. And my mother was sent to live with an aunt, as were each of the children, because it was the times where a father really couldn't keep his children with him if he had to work. And my mother never quite forgave my father for that, because he had to break up the family. She was her older sister was sent to one family, and she lived there the rest of until she was grown. And her younger brother went to live with her grandparents and had a very stable upbringing, because he was so small when he went there. My mother, on the other hand, was sent from one aunt to another, and never quite felt that anybody really wanted her. And although I don't think she had overt mental illness, the whole resulting area was very hard on her.
So approximately what year did this all take place?
Well, it had to be in the 30s, because my mother was born in 1922, and she was about somewhere between 12 and 14 when her mother died.
So that would be 35?
Something like that.
That was the year lobotomy was popularized.
Yes, well, my grandmother apparently wasn't that kind of mental illness, and they really didn't recognize postpartum mental illness until much, much, much later. Yes, they just didn't talk about it, and nobody knew what to do about it.
So can you explain postpartum?
Postpartum is when the hormones change after you've had a baby. And instead of feeling happy and very good about having a baby and having this wonderful baby, instead you feel so depressed. And it has to do with the levels of hormones. I'm not a medical person, so I don't understand it, but it has to do with the change in the hormones.
Do you think that mental illness is a topic that the public is aware of?
No, I really don't. It wasn't talked about. People didn't refer to themselves as having that kind of illness. You would hear about people who went away for their health. They went to a different climate, they went to someplace. We don't know if they were in institutions or, and sometimes they came back and sometimes they didn't. We didn't know anything about that. When I was a kid, nobody thought about mental illness. And of course your parents would never mention it to you. And today, people are more open because of the media attention to mental illness. And now there's possibilities that you don't even have to go away. You receive medication and you can live a very nice life.
Do you think that medication is used almost instead of proper treatment?
No, because medication really relieves the person's anxieties and can be the method by which you solve the problem. There are other methods, but most of those are reserved for people who need more than just the medicine. Now, people do go to psychiatrists, and they either do or do not get medicine, and they discuss their problems, and sometimes that's enough.
Yeah. How do you think treatments such as shock therapy are portrayed in the media, such as movies?
Well, I can remember seeing a movie called The Snake Pit, and that's the only movie I can remember that really made an impression on me. And this woman was very mentally ill, and one of the treatments they used was shock therapy, and they put this board or little stick-like thing in her mouth so that she wouldn't clamp down on her tongue, and then they put they shocked her body and near her head, in her head, and that would kill certain cells and might bring her relief, but then it wiped out memories as well. So it was kind of scary. I know they can still use it, and it's much more humane now, and it's much better done. The people don't have some of the same side effects from it, and they know how much to give and so forth. It can be used effectively in very ill people where medications don't work.
In your opinion, how do you think we can change today's psychiatric hospitals and their stigma for the better?
I don't think there's as much of a stigma for the hospitals as they are for mental illness. People are still not as open about mental illness, although many celebrities have brought it to the forefront so that it's more talked about than it used to be. The hospitals are now just hospitals, and when you go to a hospital, you expect to go in and get some either treatment or medication and come out better. And many times you do. There are people that they can't help, but most of the people who were mentally ill can be relieved of some of their suffering.
And I heard that you mentioned before that asylums and psychiatric hospitals back in the day were used for solely custodial purposes only.
Just about. There was very few doctors who treated, so the patients would get to see a doctor once a month or once every few months, and it was a lot of custodial care, just keeping them from hurting somebody else or themselves.
So there wasn't any real treatment?
There was treatment, but it was, one doctor can't treat 100 people effectively.
In your opinion, do you think public knowledge about this topic can help change things?
Absolutely. The more we talk about it, the more the stigma goes away, and people accept that people can have a mental illness, whether it be long-term or temporary.
And they can lead fully functional lives.
Yes, they can.
Well, thank you for coming and talking to us today, and I will talk to you later.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is not an issue in which we, as a society, can let history repeat itself. We don't need money, donations, or anything really that special to change how mental institutions are both viewed and run. All we need is both a caring and understanding community effort and willingness to be educated and make a difference. The time is now to turn these masked prisons into the healing sanctuaries they were always supposed to be.